I was never the kind of person to do last-minute shopping, but that night I had no choice. My fridge was empty, and work had drained every ounce of energy from me. By the time I got to Costco, it was nearly closing time. The store was almost empty, except for a few late shoppers like me, rushing through the aisles before they locked the doors. I grabbed a cart and hurried through the brightly lit aisles, throwing in the essentials: milk, bread, some frozen meals. The store felt different at this hour. The usual hum of customers chatting and carts rolling across the floor was replaced by a quiet stillness. The overhead speakers played some soft music, but even that sounded distant, almost like it was coming from another room. As I moved toward the checkout, something made me stop. A sound. Faint, like someone whispering just out of earshot. I turned my head, scanning the aisles, but saw no one. Just shelves stacked with bulk items and a floor that reflected the fluorescent lights above. Shaking it off, I continued, but then I heard it again. A whisper. This time, clearer. It was coming from the back storage area. I looked around, expecting to see an employee, but the few remaining shoppers were all heading toward the registers. The store's closing announcement echoed through the speakers, warning customers to make their final purchases. But curiosity got the best of me. I turned my cart and started walking toward the back. The further I walked, the quieter the store became. It was as if I had stepped into a different place entirely. I reached the heavy metal doors leading to the storage area. They were slightly open. I hesitated. This was employees only. I had no business being here. But the whisper came again, drawing me in like a thread pulling at my mind. I stepped inside. The storage area was dimly lit, with towering shelves stacked with boxes. The air was colder here, almost damp. I walked further in, following the sound. It led me past pallets of bottled water and mountains of paper towels, deeper into the storage space. That's when I saw it. An aisle that shouldn't exist. It stretched far beyond the normal layout of the store, its shelves packed with items I had never seen before. Rusty cans with no labels, jars filled with dark liquids, boxes covered in faded writing. The whispering grew louder, but I still couldn't make out the words. Something about the aisle felt wrong, like it had been hidden for a reason. But instead of turning back, I stepped forward. The moment I crossed into the aisle, the temperature dropped. My breath came out in short puffs. I reached out to touch one of the items, but as soon as my fingers brushed the surface of a tin can, the lights overhead flickered. Then the shelves moved. Not like a normal shift or a wobble. They slid, closing in behind me, blocking my way out. My heart pounded. I turned to leave, but the path I'd just walked through was gone. The aisle stretched endlessly now, shelves rising like walls on either side. The whispering had stopped. Instead, there was something worse. A scraping sound, like nails dragging across metal. I started walking faster, then running, but no matter how far I went, the aisle never ended. My footsteps echoed too loudly, as if the space around me was growing tighter. I turned a corner, hoping to find another way out, and that's when I saw them. Figures, crawling along the floor, shifting between the shelves. They weren't human. Their limbs were too long, their bodies too thin. Their heads turned toward me in unison, but they had no faces. Just blank, stretched skin where their eyes and mouths should be. They moved faster than they should have, gliding instead of walking. I backed away, but they followed. I grabbed a can from the shelf and threw it. The sound echoed like a gunshot, but the creatures didn't flinch. They just kept coming, their movements jerky, unnatural. My breath came in gasps. There had to be a way out. There had to be. Then, up ahead, I saw it. A small gap between the shelves. An opening. I sprinted, dodging the figures as they reached out with long, bony fingers. My foot caught on something and I stumbled, barely catching myself before I hit the floor. When I looked up, the gap was gone. The store lights flickered again, then cut off completely. I was trapped in darkness. The only sound was my own breathing and the slow, shuffling movement of the creatures getting closer. I reached into my pocket for my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The moment the beam hit the nearest figure, it stopped. The others froze too. They hated the light. Hope surged through me. I held the flashlight steady, stepping backward, keeping the beam trained on them, but the battery icon on my screen was red. My phone was dying. The creatures started moving again. One of them reached forward, its fingers almost touching my arm. I swung the phone toward it, and it shrank back with a silent hiss. But the screen flickered, then went black. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I had no choice. The whispering started again, rising to a deafening roar. My vision blurred. My legs felt heavy, like something was pulling me down. Then, all at once, everything stopped. The whispering, the movement, the fear. I was standing at the checkout counter, cart in front of me. The cashier gave me a tired smile. "Did you find everything you needed?" I stared at her, my breath shaky. The store was normal again, bright, safe. Had I imagined everything? I swallowed hard, nodding. I paid for my groceries, forcing my hands to stop shaking. As I walked to the exit, I turned back. The storage door was closed, just a normal store. Maybe I had just been tired, maybe I had imagined it. But then, as I stepped outside, I glanced at my receipt. At the bottom, below the total, there was a message. "Come back soon, Jake." I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the receipt, turning it over, checking my phone for any explanation. But there was none. The next morning, I decided to go back, just to prove to myself that it had all been in my head. I drove to Costco, parked in the same spot, and walked to the entrance. But something was wrong. The sliding doors were locked. A sign was taped to the glass. "Closed until further notice." I frowned. A man walked past me and muttered, "Guess they're still investigating that missing guy." I turned. "Missing?" He nodded. "Yeah, some guy never made it out last night. Left his card at the register, just disappeared. Creepy stuff." I felt my stomach drop. "Do you know his name?" The man shrugged. "I think it was Jake." I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest. That was my name. I turned to look at my reflection in the glass doors, but there was nothing there. I had no idea that stepping into Costco that afternoon would change everything. It was just supposed to be a quick stop, grab a few things, maybe browse for a while, then head back home. The place was packed, as usual. Shopping carts rolled by, kids begged their parents for candy, and employees restocked shelves. The scent of freshly baked bread mixed with the artificial coolness of the air conditioning. I didn't even need much, just a few snacks for the weekend. As I walked past the electronics section, I heard a familiar voice call my name. "Noah." I turned to see my friend Lucas waving at me from the dairy aisle. He held up a massive container of yogurt. "Dude, they have samples today. You gotta try them." Lucas was the kind of guy who never turned down free food, so it didn't surprise me that he was already making his way toward the sample stands. I laughed and followed him. The food stations were set up near the frozen section, employees standing behind carts handing out tiny paper cups filled with different products. We stopped at one table where a man in a red apron handed out tiny squares of cheese on toothpicks. Lucas grabbed one and shoved it in his mouth. "Oh man, this is good," he said with his mouth full. I took one too, chewing slowly. The cheese was sharp and a little salty, nothing unusual. I was about to move on when something caught my eye. At the very end of the sampling area, near the frozen foods, was a small table I hadn't noticed before. A woman stood behind it. She was old, her face lined with wrinkles, her hands covered in thin, papery skin. Unlike the other employees, she wasn't wearing a red apron. Instead, she wore a long black dress that seemed a little too formal for a Costco sample station. She had no sign, no brand display, just a single tray with tiny white cups. She saw me looking and smiled. "It's just for you," she said softly. Lucas had already moved on to the next station, grabbing a handful of crackers. But I couldn't look away from the woman. Her smile didn't waver as she lifted one of the tiny cups from the tray and held it out to me. I hesitated. Something about her didn't feel right. But I didn't want to be rude. It was just a sample after all. I reached out and took it. The liquid inside was thick and dark, almost like syrup. "What is it?" I asked. Her smile widened. "A special recipe, just for you." I glanced around. No one else seemed to notice her. The shoppers continued moving through the aisles, chatting and laughing. The other sample stations were busy. I lifted the cup to my lips and took a sip. The taste was strange. Sweet at first, but then something bitter spread across my tongue. It felt heavy, like it was coating my throat. I coughed, shaking my head. "That's different," I said, trying to smile. The woman tilted her head. "You'll get used to it." As I turned to walk away, a sudden wave of coldness rushed through me. My vision blurred for a second, and when I blinked, the store had gone completely silent. I spun around. Everyone was gone. My heart pounded as I looked around. A second ago, the store had been full of people. Now it was completely empty. The shopping carts stood abandoned, half filled with groceries. The checkout lanes were deserted. The employees, the customers, everyone had vanished. I turned back to the sample station. The woman was still there, but she was different now. Her skin had stretched too tight over her bones. Her eyes had sunk deep into her face. Her smile remained, but her teeth were too sharp, too long. Her hands, once delicate and wrinkled, now had fingers that ended in long, curved nails. "You liked it, didn't you?" she asked, stepping closer. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over an empty cart. My breath came in short gasps. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be real. "What did you do?" I demanded. She tilted her head again, like a curious bird. "I gave you a taste of something special, and now you belong to me." I turned and ran. My feet pounded against the polished floor as I sprinted down the empty aisles. My breath was ragged, my heart racing so fast it felt like it would burst. I reached the front doors and shoved against them. They didn't budge. Locked. My reflection in the glass showed wide, terrified eyes. Behind me, the woman was walking slowly, her black dress trailing across the floor. "You can't leave, Noah," she called. "Not yet." I spun around, looking for another way out. The emergency exit. I ran toward it, but as I reached for the handle, my fingers passed right through it. It wasn't solid, it was like smoke, like an image that wasn't really there. I turned back. The store had changed. The bright overhead lights were flickering, the shelves shifting slightly, like they were breathing. The air smelled different now, rotting, stale. And the woman was still coming. "Please," I begged, backing away. "What do you want?" Her smile never faded. "You." I grabbed a glass bottle from a shelf and hurled it at her. It shattered at her feet, but she didn't even flinch. "You can run," she said, "but it won't matter." I sprinted again, turning down random aisles, but no matter where I went, the layout was wrong. The shelves twisted, leading me in circles. The frozen food aisle stretched endlessly. The checkout counters moved further away. Then, ahead of me, I saw something worse. Lucas. He stood at the far end of the aisle, his back to me. "Lucas!" I called. He didn't move. I ran toward him, grabbing his shoulder, but the moment I touched him, he crumbled into dust. I screamed. The woman was closer now. Her fingers twitched, her mouth widening. "You're almost ready," she whispered. Pain shot through my stomach, a deep, aching hunger. My hands trembled as I looked down. My skin was turning pale, my veins darkening. I was changing. She reached for me. "Just one more taste." I screamed and shoved her away. For the first time, her smile faded. I turned and ran, pushing myself harder than ever. The aisles blurred around me. Then suddenly I was outside. I gasped for air, stumbling into the parking lot. The sun was shining, cars rolled past. The world was normal again. I looked back. Costco stood behind me, just as it had before. Had it been real? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tiny sample cup. It was still there, filled with the thick, dark liquid. A slow, terrible realization crept over me. I had escaped, but I had brought something back with me. I never liked working the night shift. The store felt different after closing. Too quiet, too still. During the day, Costco was packed with families, workers pushing carts, and employees rushing to restock shelves. But at night, when the doors were locked and the aisles were empty, the silence made my skin crawl. I sat in the security office, sipping stale coffee, watching the monitors. The screens flickered between different parts of the store: frozen foods, electronics, checkout lanes. Nothing out of the ordinary. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms. My radio crackled. "Everything clear on your end, Daniel?" It was Mark, the other night guard. He was on patrol, making his usual rounds. "Yeah," I replied. "Just another boring night." "Good. I'll check the loading dock and be back in 10. I nodded even though he couldn't see me and turned my attention back to the screens. That's when I noticed something strange. In the paper towel aisle, someone was standing there. It wasn't a customer. No one was supposed to be inside. The man stood completely still, his face hidden by the angle of the camera. He didn't move, didn't shift, just stood between the shelves like he was waiting for something. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I leaned forward, staring at the screen. The man didn't move. His clothes were dark, his hands hanging at his sides. "Mark, are you near the paper towel aisle?" I asked over the radio. "Not yet." "Why?" "There's someone there. Check it out." "On my way." I kept my eyes on the screen as Mark walked into the frame. He moved carefully, flashlight in hand, but the second he stepped into the aisle, my stomach twisted. The man was gone. Mark waved at the camera. "Daniel, there's no one here." I looked again. The aisle was empty. The shelves, the carts, everything was in its place. "But I just saw him," I said. Mark sighed. "Maybe you need a break, man. I'll finish my rounds and meet you at the office." I nodded slowly, still staring at the monitor. Then my breath caught in my throat. On the screen, the man was back. Only now, he was staring directly into the camera. I froze. The man's face was completely blank. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth skin stretched too tightly over his skull. "Mark," I whispered into the radio. "Check the cameras." Static crackled in response. "Mark?" Nothing. The radio was dead. My hands felt cold as I watched the screen. The man didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stared. A loud knock echoed from the hallway. I jumped, my chair scraping against the floor. My eyes darted to the security room door. Another knock. Slow, steady. I swallowed hard. The cameras still showed him standing in the aisle, but something in me knew. He wasn't there anymore. He was right outside the door. I reached for my radio again. "Mark, where are you?" Silence. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk, took a deep breath, and stood up. The air felt thick, heavy, like the room itself was pressing down on me. I stepped toward the door and slowly turned the handle. The hallway was empty. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. My footsteps echoed as I stepped out, scanning both directions. "Mark?" I called softly. No answer. I walked toward the paper towel aisle, my flashlight beam sweeping over the shelves. Everything looked normal. No sign of the man. No sign of Mark. I was about to turn back when something flickered in my peripheral vision. One of the security monitors. I turned my head slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The cameras were still running, but the image had changed. Every single screen now showed the same thing: Mr. standing in the aisle. I gasped and spun around, but I was alone. I looked back at the screens. My reflection was still there, but I wasn't moving. And behind me, in the monitors, the faceless man was standing right next to me. I whirled around, flashlight shaking in my hands. The aisle was empty. No one was there, but I wasn't safe. I ran back toward the security room, slamming the door behind me. My breath came in short gasps as I locked it. I turned back to the monitors. The man wasn't in the aisle anymore. Now, he was standing right outside the security room door. I held my breath. Slowly, the handle began to turn. I pressed my back against the desk, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The door didn't open. The handle just kept moving, rattling softly. Then it stopped. A whisper filled the room. "You're next." I don't remember how long I sat there. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't feel real anymore. The cameras kept flickering, showing glimpses of the store: darkened aisles, empty shelves, abandoned carts. Then, one by one, the screens shut off. Static filled the room. And in the darkness, I saw my own face staring back at me. Only it wasn't me anymore. The eyes were empty. The mouth was stretched into something unnatural. And behind my reflection, the faceless man stood, whispering something I couldn't understand. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the feeling of something cold wrapping around my shoulders. The next morning, the store opened as usual. Employees walked in, customers grabbed their carts, and the day carried on. But when Mark arrived for his shift, something was wrong. The security room door was slightly open. Inside, I was sitting in the chair, eyes wide open, staring at the black monitors. I wasn't moving. I wasn't blinking. Mark called my name, shook my shoulder. Nothing. The paramedics came. They checked my pulse, my breathing. I was alive, but I wouldn't respond. I was trapped somewhere else. And on the security footage from the night before, there was one final frame. A single frozen image of the paper towel aisle. Empty, except for the faceless man, looking straight into the camera and smiling. Working late at Costco wasn't new to me. I had taken the shift countless times before, organizing inventory, checking stock, making sure everything was in place before the morning rush. But that night, something felt off. Maybe it was just exhaustion, or maybe it was the way the fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, making the shadows stretch longer than they should. I was alone in the upstairs storage area, stacking boxes of bulk cereal and toilet paper. My coworker, Tim, had left early, and the store was locked for the night. It was just me and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I glanced at my watch. 12:30 a.m. Almost done. Then I heard it. Footsteps. They weren't coming from upstairs, but from below, near the aisles. Heavy, steady, like someone walking slowly through the empty store. I froze, listening. It was impossible. The doors were locked. The security alarms were set. No one else was supposed to be inside. I crept toward the metal railing overlooking the main floor and peered down. That's when I saw him. Mr. At first, my brain refused to understand what I was looking at. There, walking between the aisles, was someone who looked exactly like me. Same uniform, same messy hair, even the same way I walked, hands slightly swinging at my sides. I gripped the railing, my heart pounding. This had to be some kind of trick, a reflection, a weird shadow. Number. It was real. The other me stopped near the frozen food section and slowly turned his head upward. Our eyes met. Then he smiled. Not a normal smile, not something I'd ever seen on my own face. It was too wide, stretching too far, like his skin wasn't made to move that way. A sharp pain shot through my skull, and I stumbled back, gripping my forehead. The air around me felt thick, heavy. My ears started ringing. When I looked again, he was gone. But the footsteps hadn't stopped. They were coming up the stairs. I bolted toward the back of the storage area, my pulse racing. The footsteps were steady, unhurried, but they never stopped. They were following me. I ducked behind a stack of boxes, forcing myself to breathe as quietly as possible. My mind was spinning. This wasn't possible. There was no way I had just seen myself, and there was no way he was coming for me. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I gripped the edge of a metal shelf, trying to steady myself. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and wait for him to find me. I reached for my radio and pressed the button. Hello, anyone? Mark, Tim, anyone in security, please respond. Nothing, just static. I peeked around the boxes. The storage area was empty. The stairs were empty. Had I imagined it? I exhaled, trying to calm my nerves. Maybe I was just tired, overworked. Then I turned back and saw myself standing a few feet away. His head was tilted slightly, that same stretched grin plastered across his face. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. I stumbled backward, knocking over a box of canned soup. The sound echoed through the empty storage space, but he didn't flinch. What do you want? I managed to ask, my voice shaking. He took a step forward, hands hanging at his sides, fingers twitching slightly. You shouldn't be here, he repeated, but his voice sounded wrong, layered, like two voices speaking at once. I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. I sprinted down the narrow walkway between shelves, dodging carts and crates. The air felt colder and my legs felt heavier, like something was trying to slow me down. Then I heard it. Footsteps. But they weren't behind me. They were ahead. I skidded to a stop as another figure stepped out from behind the shelves. It was me. There were two of them now, identical, both watching me with the same eerie expression. You shouldn't be here, they whispered together. I turned to run back, but my foot slipped, and I crashed onto the hard concrete floor. Pain shot through my knee. As I tried to crawl away, I felt cold fingers wrap around my ankle. I kicked and thrashed, trying to break free. The grip was firm, unnatural, like I was being held by something stronger than human hands. Let go, I shouted. The fingers tightened. I twisted my body and aimed a desperate kick at its face. My shoe connected, and for a brief second, I felt something give. Then the grip loosened, and I scrambled to my feet. The storage area wasn't the same anymore. The shelves stretched impossibly high. The lights flickered like they were barely holding on. The aisles twisted in ways that didn't make sense. I wasn't in Costco anymore, or at least not the Costco I knew. The whispers surrounded me now. Dozens of voices, all saying the same thing. You shouldn't be here. I ran, turning blindly through the maze of endless shelves. Then I saw the exit door. I sprinted toward it, lungs burning, feet aching. I reached for the handle, and a hand clamped over mine. I spun around. It was me, the other me. His eyes weren't mine anymore. They were hollow, dark, empty. His smile had faded into something else, something cruel. You took my place, he whispered. I shook my head. No, this isn't right. You're not real. His grip tightened. Neither are you. The world around us flickered like a broken TV signal. The shelves wavered, the air shimmered. My head felt light, dizzy. He pushed me backward. I fell, but I didn't hit the ground. I hit cold, smooth glass. I gasped, scrambling to my feet. I was in the security monitor. I pounded on the screen, shouting, screaming. I could see the store now, normal, untouched. Morning had arrived. Employees were walking around, customers filling their carts. And there, walking through the aisles, was him, the other me. He looked up at the security camera, and he smiled. Tim walked into the storage area, yawning. Josh, he called. You here, man? A figure stepped out from behind a shelf, stretching his arms. Yeah, I said. Just finishing up. Tim nodded. Cool. Let's grab coffee after this? I smiled. Sounds good. As we walked toward the exit, I glanced up at the security camera. On the screen, trapped behind the glass, was the real Josh, screaming, but no one could hear him. I was tired and I just wanted to get home. The store was almost empty, the usual crowd gone, and the silence made the massive aisles feel even bigger. I checked my watch, 8:45 p.m. Costco was about to close. My cart was filled with the usual: snacks, frozen meals, a big pack of bottled water. I had spent more than I planned, but that was normal. My wife always joked that I couldn't leave Costco without spending at least $100. I rolled my cart toward the exit, the bright overhead lights buzzing faintly. The last step was always the receipt check. A simple routine: hand the paper over, get a nod, and walk out. The checker was an old man I had never seen before. Most of the time I recognized the workers, but not him. He had a blank expression, his face lined with deep wrinkles, his eyes dark and hollow. He didn't even glance at me when I held out my receipt. Instead, he took it, scanned it slowly, then shook his head. "You forgot something," he said, his voice dry and empty. I frowned. "What?" "No, I got everything." He lifted a bony finger and pointed at my cart. I looked down. It was empty. I stared at the cart, my stomach twisting. This wasn't possible. I had just been pushing a full cart. My receipt even listed everything: the cereal, the frozen pizza, the drinks. I looked back up. What kind of joke is this? The old man was gone. The exit doors, the ones that usually slid open automatically, remained shut. I turned to the security guard standing near the entrance. "Hey, something's wrong with the doors. Can you—" There was no security guard. The front of the store was completely empty. The greeters, the customers, even the cashiers, they were all gone. The store was silent. I gripped the handle of my cart, my breath quickening. Had I blacked out? Was this some weird prank? "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I pulled out my phone to call my wife. No service. Then from deep within the aisles, I heard a faint rustling sound. Someone else was here. I left the cart behind and stepped back into the store. Maybe there was a power issue. Maybe everyone had been told to leave and I had somehow missed the announcement. I walked past the registers, my footsteps echoing too loudly. The aisles stretched out like empty streets, the overhead lights flickering slightly. Then I saw something move near the frozen foods section, a shadow darting between shelves. "Hey!" I called out, hurrying toward it. I turned the corner, expecting to find an employee. But instead, I found the old man. He was standing perfectly still, facing away from me, his head slightly tilted. "Sir?" I said, keeping my distance. "I don't know what's going on, but I need to leave. The doors won't open." He didn't respond. I took a cautious step forward. "Did you hear me?" Slowly, he turned his head. Not his body, just his head, twisting too far, like his neck had no bones. "You forgot something," he whispered. Then the store lights went out. Darkness swallowed the store. I couldn't see anything, couldn't tell where the old man was. My breath came in short gasps as I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, but the old man was gone again. I needed to get out. Now I moved carefully, keeping the light in front of me. The shelves felt taller, the aisles longer, as if the store itself was stretching, changing. Then I heard the sound again, the rustling. But now it was everywhere. Shelves shook slightly, boxes shifted. Something was moving through the store. Something big. I ran. My footsteps pounded against the tile floor as I sprinted toward the exit. The doors were still there, but they looked wrong, like they weren't made of glass anymore, but something darker. I didn't stop. I reached the doors and pushed hard. They didn't move. Then behind me, a voice whispered, "You forgot something." I turned slowly, my phone's light shaking in my hands. The old man stood just a few feet away now, his expression still blank. But there was something different about him. His arms were longer, his fingers stretched too far. "What do you want?" I forced out. He tilted his head. "You." My heart slammed against my ribs. "What?" He took a step forward, and suddenly my chest tightened. A terrible pressure, like something was pulling me backward, like I was being dragged into something invisible. Images flashed through my mind, me walking into the store, grabbing my cart, checking my list. But something was missing. My cart had been empty. Had I ever really picked up anything? Had I ever really walked in at all? The world around me spun. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air. The old man knelt in front of me, his face now inches from mine. "You forgot yourself," he whispered. I squeezed my eyes shut. This wasn't real. This was a dream, a nightmare, a trick. I forced myself to breathe. Then I heard something else, a different sound. Beeping. I opened my eyes. I was standing at the checkout line. My cart was full again. The cashier was scanning my items. People were around me, talking, moving like nothing had happened. I turned, searching for the old man. He was nowhere to be seen. Had I imagined everything? The cashier handed me my receipt. "Have a good night," she said. I nodded, gripping the paper tightly, and walked toward the exit. The receipt checker was there. Not the old man, but the usual employee. A young woman with a kind smile. She took my receipt, glanced at my cart, and nodded. "You're all set." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The doors slid open. I stepped outside. The cold night air hit my face, grounding me back in reality. My car was parked exactly where I had left it. I loaded my groceries into the trunk, still shaken. I needed to tell my wife about this, but what would I even say? That I had been trapped in some nightmare inside a Costco? I got in, started the car, and looked at my rearview mirror, and froze. In the back seat, sitting completely still, was the old man. He smiled. "You forgot something?"